The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, just recently issued a brand new warning about inflation and how it's not going to be going down as quickly or as easily as everybody thought, including the Fed. They said, oh, don't worry, inflation is transitory. Well, apparently it's here to stay for a long time, because this recent announcement from the IMF basically says that inflation may stay stickier than expected, which raises the prospect for higher for longer interest rates, which is something that we've talked about many times here on the channel. And a lot of people think that, hey, this is going to go away. Pretty soon in September, they're going to cut rates, which there is a possibility that they might. But even if they do, the rates are still going to be much higher than they were a couple of years ago. According to the IMF, they say that service prices and wage inflation are two main areas of concern when it comes to the path of slowing inflation. And another part of their warning here says that unless goods inflation declines further, rising service prices and wages might keep overall inflation higher than desired. And this is globally, not just in the US that they're talking about here. And why does this matter, guys? Why does it matter if they were wrong about inflation being transitory and it persists higher for longer and the interest rates persist higher for longer? Why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because it poses a big risk to basically avoiding this recession, which isn't going to happen. This recession has already started, as far as I'm concerned, and will become official at some point in the next 12 months, most likely. And there's also a risk to the economy right now that a lot of people aren't thinking about, which is that even if growth slows in the economy, inflation can still persist. And that's because the slower growth can cause productivity to weaken. So companies won't have the benefit of higher productivity to offset wage gains, and will have to keep raising prices to pay workers, especially when profit margins are already squeezed. So what we could be facing is the wage price spiral, where companies continue to charge more and more for their goods and services to keep paying their employees enough to keep up with inflation. And so everything gets more expensive for everyone, which can also lead to the economy slowing down even further, because not everybody will be getting that pay raise to keep up with buying those goods and services. And therefore, different businesses start to slow down more, they start to lay more people off, and they close up their doors, just like we've seen so many do already so far in 2024. And another thing that could affect the global economy right now is the fact that the US debt is completely out of control. And what it's doing is it's causing us to rely more on short-term funding here in the US, which means that we have to go to market more often, and it increases our vulnerability here. More countries now are starting to impose tariffs and starting to be less trade-friendly, and ultimately that doesn't help with inflation either. According to the IMF, they say that more than 3,000 trade restrictive measures were put into place in 2023, which is up from only 1,000 that were put in place in 2019. So, and every time this happens, usually another country will retaliate and put up their own trade restrictive measure in return. And all this restrictiveness just actually makes everything more expensive, as if that's what people need right now. Really, what we need is things to get cheaper. What we really need is deflation, but that is the government and the Fed's worst nightmare. Like, they don't want that. They don't want to see prices coming down. They just want to see inflation slow down, so where the price jumps are just not as extreme as they are today. But you know, guys, I'm always looking for good deals on things, and that's why
this video is sponsored by Cook Unity, the world's first chef-to-consumer platform. Cook Unity chefs offer up a wide range of meals with over 7 different dietary preference filters, including vegan, paleo, and gluten-free options. But my favorite one was the Mission-style burrito by Chef Jose Garces. To me, it tasted just like an authentic burrito you would get at a real Mexican restaurant. And honestly, to have this delivered to your doorstep and the convenience of that when you're a busy guy like me really means a lot. It only takes a few minutes just to heat it up in the microwave, and take a look at how these meals end up. I mean, this was the teriyaki beef I had, Also, you had the mac and cheese with the barbecue chicken. I mean, it was delicious. I mean, just look at it. And because we're all busy, Cook Unity offers a very flexible schedule where you can get meals delivered 1 week and put it on pause for a few weeks if you're going to be out of town with no stress. You won't be charged. And honestly, I think everybody should give this a try. So head on over to cookunity.com/Michael50 or click the link in the description and use my code Michael50 to get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals to try them out for yourself.
Now, I saw a very interesting story today where they interviewed the CEO of Allstate Insurance, guys, and he actually dropped a few interesting truth bombs that I want to go over with you in this video, because once you know some of these things, it kind of shines a big light on insurance and how things really work. Now, it's probably no secret or surprise that insurance companies' biggest nightmare right now is climate change. You know, they are worried because the earth keeps getting warmer, and because of the warming, they are seeing more and more global catastrophes and events that they have to end up covering with their policies. But one of the biggest problems, they say, is that people continue to build bigger and more expensive houses in all the wrong places. And that's something I actually agree with the insurance companies. You know, it's kind of funny every time, you know, when I'm walking through Miami and I'm walking past like the Bay, and you have these waterfront houses, right, that sell for tens of millions of dollars, and they're building a brand new house right there, you know, giant, super expensive house. No insurance company wants to touch that because it's an insurance nightmare unless you want to be paying, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in premiums per year. And it's because of those extremely high risks that a company like Allstate is no longer writing homeowners insurance policies in Florida or here in California. Now, insurance has never been my expertise, guys. It was selling real estate, and I'd never actually had to make an insurance claim for myself. Like as far as a homeowners insurance claim, I've made some auto insurance claims, and there's some things in here about this too. But one thing that the Allstate CEO said about homeowners insurance is one way that these guys are making extra money right now is like this. One thing that they found with all of their data is whenever there's a big catastrophe or a big weather event, one of the most common claims and replacements that they need to do are roof replacements, all right? What they do is called age-rated roofs. And what this is if your roof is brand new and it gets ripped off by a storm, we'll give you a brand new roof, right? But if your roof is 25 years old, we'll give you a prorated amount appropriately reflective of the cost. So essentially, if you have a very old roof and you make a claim with Allstate anyways, I can't speak for all the insurance companies, they will basically give you nothing, okay? You know, say a brand new roof costs 30 grand and your roof is 25 years old, then maybe they'll only end up giving you a few $1,000s, which is like the remaining life's value of that roof, so to speak. So it's a way that they can kind of get out of paying some of these claims, even though they're covering you for it. And one reason I find this interesting is because, like for example, with a lot of the insurance companies in Florida now, you have to get a new roof. You know, if your roof is more than 10 or 15 years old, it's a requirement for you to replace your roof in order to get insurance. But as much as that sucks, the upside is if something does happen to your roof, then they should be responsible for replacing the entire roof and putting a brand new one on if something were to happen. So insurance companies have all sorts of ways like this to save money and not pay you, essentially. And I like covering these different things, guys, because like I said, I'm not an insurance expert, and I'm sure a lot of people that watch the channel are not either. And every time you hear about one of these things, it gives you a heads up of knowing what kind of coverage maybe you should be paying for, what kind of things to watch out for with insurance policies. And besides homeowners insurance, one of the biggest problems has been the giant increase in auto insurance over the past couple of years, all right? The last 2 years in a row, the auto insurance premiums rose by about 16% on average. So that's 32% in just 2 years for anyone who's counting. And I'm sure almost everyone has felt that increase up until this point. I know I certainly have. But according to this Allstate CEO, he says that one of the things that's impacting the auto insurance rates to climb is used car prices, okay? Those rose about 60% between 2020 and 2022. And even though prices of cars have started to come down recently, one thing that has not come down is labor costs for car repairs and car parts. The prices of parts are not coming down either. One thing that's driving the insurance cost even more, he said, is that more car companies are taking the approach of give away the razor and sell you the blade, meaning that they kind of sell you the car on the cheap, but when the car needs to be replaced, it costs a lot of money for the parts. And he's saying that parts for cars, especially OEM parts straight from the manufacturer, are one of the biggest money grabs for car companies right now. When you need a repair, that's when they're really going to get you, between the labor and the parts. And a lot of times insurance has to cover those costs if it's due to an accident. And here's where it gets interesting, because he said that one thing that Allstate tries to do is they try to get people to take non-OEM parts all the time, but people fight them on it, and that's keeping the insurance premiums high. Now, I don't know how many times you guys have had to take your car in for repair, or what kind of experience you have with OEM parts versus non-OEM parts, but a few of you who really watched my videos and saw my Camaro back when I was in Illinois, I have had to replace so many different parts on that car, okay? Not due to accidents, just because the car's old and it needs maintenance, right? Well, one thing I kind of found out the hard way with that car is I went through about 4 different water pumps on that car, and only up until the last one that got installed, which was an OEM part, that's the one that has lasted the longest and hasn't failed. Prior to that, I was installing non-OEM water pumps on the car, and they would last a couple years maximum. Before you know it, it was spitting out coolant and the car's overheating and you're dead and stranded on the side of the road. And then once I realized that putting the OEM part on the car, even though it's quite a bit more expensive, you're not having to deal with the repair nearly as often, or maybe never again, I started putting OEM parts on the car, and since then I've had way less problems, okay? But these are things that you don't know unless you actually experience it and deal with that. Some people want to take the cheap route and just put the cheapest parts on it because you figure, oh, it's all the same. But in reality, it's not even close to being the same as far in terms of reliability and how long those parts will last. And think about it, you put cheap parts on the car and it breaks down a couple years later, now you have to pay the labor costs again, which have probably gone up since the last time you paid for it, and it ends up costing you more in the end. You see, that's one of Allstate's money-saving tactics, is because they can get away with paying less per claim by putting non-OEM parts on your car. And of course, they want you to take it to the shop that they choose, which is not a requirement, but a lot of times people do it because they have agreements worked out with them where they can pay them lower labor costs as well, and therefore they can have a higher profit margin. And I'm not saying this is inherently bad. Like, obviously every company tries to make a profit, guys, including insurance companies, and this is one of their methods. But as a consumer, you should know this, so you know what to look out for. And if you're in this situation, you know you don't have to accept non-OEM parts, and you can also take the car to whatever shop that you wish. But another big reason that auto insurance premiums have gone up so much are due to fender bender lawsuits, which is basically every time one of the customers gets into a tiny little accident, they get sued. All right, and when they get sued, the insurance company has to represent them in the lawsuit. That causes a significant increase in what we call bodily injury costs, which is reflected in the increased rates and premiums we collect. Now, this is something that should be completely outlawed, guys. For these tiny little fender bender accidents, nobody should be allowed to sue for this unless there is a legitimate, confirmed by a doctor injury that happened during this accident, okay? But 99% of the time, that's not the case. People just sue in order to get the extra insurance money, okay? I actually went through this myself probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. I got in a crash, and what happened was it was a small little accident, basically one of these fender bender accidents. And the moment I saw the woman that crashed into me, all right, the moment I saw her get out of the car, she all was acting injured and everything, and she was on the phone with 911 before you could even blink. all right? And she called the ambulance because she said she was injured, and they actually took her away in the ambulance, and literally there was hardly any damage to her car, guys. Like, nothing really happened. It was basically this side swipe sort of deal, and then we kind of braked and slowed down and hit the curb a little bit. It wasn't like a giant crazy crash, you know, with big damages and the car's getting totaled, nothing like that. And of course, she wanted to sue my insurance company for like 50 grand, something like that. She got a lawyer, she tried to sue, and my insurance company represented me in the lawsuit, and in the end, they settled with her, and she ended up getting like 10 grand, which I think was the PIP maximum of my policy in Florida. But it was probably still worth it for her to sue, in the sense that, okay, say I sue and you know, I get that 10 grand, and my lawyer maybe will take, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 of it. I'm still going to go home with $6,000 or $7,000 I didn't have before, just because she played the victim. That should be completely outlawed, guys. It's making everyone's insurance premiums go through the roof, and it's wrong morally, and there's no grounds for these lawsuits, especially when nothing actually happened. And it just drives me nuts that there's people out there like this that just kind of ruin it for everybody, you know? Like, everybody's just sue happy and wants to sue people. Like, even, I will tell you this, since this video was sponsored, okay, I get approached by all different types of sponsorship companies, right? And one of them, which I won't say the name, was a law firm. And they wanted me to promote hiring, you know, this law firm for suing people, guys. And I'm not gonna do that. You know, they offered me a lot of money, and I said no, because I think it's wrong. Of course, there's always gonna be some sort of grounds for a lawsuit when necessary. But you know, a lot of these law firms, they make their money, their bread and butter, on these little Mickey Mouse unnecessary lawsuits, you know, suing for 10, 15, 20 grand here and there for these little fender bender car accidents and stuff like that, and it all adds up to a lot in the end. But who ends up paying for it? We all do, because our insurance rates go up from it. So I won't be promoting things like that here on the channel. But everybody needs to eat, you know?
Here we have a house for sale that's already pending. They were asking $1.4 million, and it literally went under contract in just a matter of about a week and a half, really. They listed June 13th. By June 27th, was already pending. But check this out, guys. This is very common for the area up here, especially in the North Bay. I noticed this a lot with these houses. The last time this house sold was in 1974 for only $63,000, and now it's trading for north of $1.3 million. That's how you know life is not fair. And on top of that, because of Prop 13 here in California, their property tax bill has only been $3,700 a year up until now. So people who bought 30 or 40 years ago have been able to benefit tremendously from this increase in home prices here, but the new person is going to be paying about $24,000, $25,000 a year in property taxes after they close on this house.
And speaking of eating, one thing I haven't talked about in a while is the California $20 an hour fast food minimum wage. You know, this is something that happened back in April, and we've seen already a lot of fast food businesses get impacted by this. But I found a different story today, kind of talking about some of the impacts that's going on here. They talked to one guy who owns 7 different Wendy's locations in Los Angeles. One thing I've said time and time again is these fast food business owners are gonna find ways to not pay people, right? They're gonna find ways to keep their profit margins up. One way that this guy did it is he just schedules one less person to come in for a day and time, and he will cover that shift essentially. So you're having the business owner cover a shift instead of having an employee do it, and that's enough to make up the difference. And a lot of people are in favor of having, you know, the $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers. But if you're having less and less people benefit from it, then the benefit is not as far reaching as that was intended when they made this law. And some of the proponents of this are saying, well, we're still adding jobs after this new law went into effect. In fact, we've added 8,000 jobs compared to the same period in 2023. Also, they're saying that now that the positions pay more money, they're attracting better job candidates, which is also reducing their turnover, not having as many people come in and quit a few months later. So this is so so far been a positive for the fast food industry. But I would venture to say that owners who are now working a shift in place of an employee would beg to differ, because of what a lot of people who own these fast food chains are saying is that, after being in business for decades, that they've never had to increase their prices as much as they've had to now with this recent change in the minimum wage. But some of these price increases are not as bad as I would think they would be. Like, for example, this guy owns a Jersey Mike's here in California, and before you could buy a turkey sub for under $10. Now it's $11.15. So it's not a huge increase, maybe $1.50 or so, because he said it's under $10. So let's say it was $9.50 or so, and now it's $11.15. So it is more expensive, but it's not breaking the bank more expensive. But guys like this still have to cut out employees that would normally be making this $20 an hour. You're just going to have fewer people making that money. Like, for example, he says that he had about 165 employees, and ever since this new law went into effect, he's had to get rid of about 20 of them, and now he's down to 145 employees. So yeah, it's good for those 145 people that are still earning that $20 an hour, but what about the 20 people that got laid off and now have to find new work? And it's going to be harder for them, most likely, to find another fast food job now that you got more business owners actually getting rid of people rather than hiring people. And another thing that's happening is it's pushing out these smaller fast food businesses in favor of bigger fast food chains that can afford the increase, number one, and also can afford to implement new technologies like automation. Like McDonald's, for example, is doing this in a lot of their restaurants. You've seen Taco Bell do this in a lot of their restaurants, and I'm sure they're all going to end up following suit in the end, where you go in there and you don't even speak to anybody. You go in, you order the food off of a kiosk, and somebody brings you the food in the end, and I'm sure one day they're going to figure out how to make it so you don't even need a person bringing you the food. It'll be a robot bringing you the food, eliminating yet another position. So this guy that owns the Wendy's hasn't actually had to fire anybody yet or lay anybody off, and doesn't plan to. But one thing he is doing instead is he's raising his prices across the board 8%, and he's also cutting overtime, so you're not getting any of that anymore, as well as each worker is getting less hours per shift. And that's where he's making up the difference. He's actually coming in and replacing them for those less hours that they should be working. And here's the biggest problem with this minimum wage increase, okay? When labor costs jump more than 25% overnight, any restaurant business with already thin margins will be forced to reduce expenses elsewhere. And that's exactly what you're seeing all of them do. And they find their own ways to do it. The guy from Wendy's isn't laying people off. The guy from Jersey Mike's has laid people off, and they still get the same amount of hours. So it's always going to come at a cost for somebody. Listen, guys, I've already given you my stance on this. I don't think that the government should be getting involved in this and, forcing these businesses to pay $20 an hour. I think if the market will bear it and they can raise the wages to that naturally, then by all means. But having it being government mandated causes issues like we're seeing here. In fact, now that I'm talking about this, it reminded me that now that I'm here in California, that I should go into some of these fast food joints and just show you guys some of the prices that people are facing here. So if you want to see that video, make sure you let me know in the comments. And just one more anecdotal story here is they talked to another general manager at Del Taco in Orange County. They used to have 4 people working per shift. Now it's only 2 people working per shift. And when you see this happen and you have less people working and the restaurant's still busy, it increases wait times for customers and makes it a less than desirable experience for them. In fact, since I've gotten here to Marin County, I went to In-N-Out Burger a couple times right off the 101. It's like the only one around here. And let me tell you guys, it has been slow. Not slow business-wise, but slow service-wise. And they do have a lot of people working there, and they are busy, so it could just be that. But the last couple times I was here, it's fast. You get to the front of the counter, you order, and usually less than 10 minutes later, you'd have your food. Lately, it feels like almost a 20-minute wait. The last time I was there was about 20 minutes from the time we ordered to the time we got the food. Like, we literally could have went to a sit-down restaurant instead of going to In-N-Out Burger and got our food in the same amount of time. And last night I was thinking about going there, but I have a bunch of food in the house, right? I was feeling a little bit lazy to cook, but then I thought about my last experience at In-N-Out Burger. I was like, you know, by the time I go there, drive to the In-N-Out and sit there and wait for my food, I can probably just cook dinner at home and be eating them in about the same amount of time. And that's what I did. So this does influence people's decision to actually go to a restaurant or not. I mean, yesterday it literally impacted my decision of not wanting to go because I didn't want to wait 20 minutes to get a cheeseburger, plus the drive there. Kind of defeats the whole point of going to somewhere called In-N-Out, you know, into a fast food restaurant. But anyways, I think this is going to have some major impacts moving forward. It hasn't even been a year yet, and you're already seeing businesses start to suffer from it, and I will keep you guys posted on all of it. So make sure, if you enjoyed this video, you are subscribed to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.